Your Excellencies, Ambassador Tanmaya Lal, Ambassador Klaus Molin, the Indian Embassy in Sweden, our esteemed panelists from Sweden and India, and our head of FICCI, Uday Shankar, and to, of course, all our audience who's joining us from India and Sweden and perhaps from other parts of the world. A big namaste, hello, and a warm welcome to Engaging India at Almedalen Future Urbanisms. The Almedalen Week is in its 52nd year now, and during this week every year, over 45,000 people, policymakers, researchers, corporates, industry representatives, activists, the media, and interested people arrive at the island of Gotland in Sweden and here at the Almedalen Park, next to which we are digicasting live 40,000 people with 4,000 plus seminars in a week-long affair from different walks of life, engage in conversations about the most pressing global issues of our times, issues that affect us as a people and issues that affect us as a planet. This year, of course, Almedalen Week is very different. It is special, it is unprecedented. There are many terms that you can call it, but this is also the first time that we have been able to get such an interesting mix of people from both India and Sweden, because the fact that it is a digital event has allowed us to do so. And while we miss the infectious energy of thousands of people in just about two kilometers, jostling for space, wanting to go through to every seminar that that finds their interest and trying to maximize their time, networking, interacting with each other, quickly grabbing a bite before going on to the next seminar, we miss all that, of course. What this has allowed us to do is expand the possibility to enrich our thought with a much more diverse set of people and look at new approaches to co-think and co-create. And of course, build connections between Sweden and India on global issues. This seminar series, Engaging India at Almedalen 2021 Future Urbanisms, looks to connect the urban needs and the innovative spirit as well as the technological prowess and entrepreneurial energy of India with the ideas of sustainability, resilience, the triple helix model, and the business models of Sweden and the Nordic world. This year's seminar series will also showcase and formally introduce a Zero City, which is a collaborative platform that has emerged from Future Urbanisms to create sustainable solutions for cities and its communities. Ahead of the 2021 Engaging India at Almedalen, the ambassador of India to Sweden, Mr. Tanmaya Lal, graciously accepted our request to come to Gotland to share his thoughts in an opening interview from Almedalen Park, the birthplace of Almedalen Week. So thank you so much, Ambassador. And let us play out that interview. We've in fact taken a lot of threads from what you have said, and we'll be engaging with those conversations and those pointers later on in the seminar series as well. Welcome to WISB, Ambassador Tanmaya Lal. It is such a pleasure to have you here. We are at a very, very special place. This is a center point of Almedalen Week. This is where it all started over half a century ago. And today, Almedalen Week has grown to be one of the biggest meeting points and biggest festivals and celebrations, really, of democratic values as well as cooperation. And it is such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for making that effort, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Rupali. Thank you. And it's indeed a pleasure to be here. And it's a historic and important location. Wonderful morning. So thank you very much.
I will like to start with India-Sweden relations, and India and Sweden have had a long-standing relationship and one that is based on mutual respect and trust. Now, we are in the midst of a pandemic. In a post-pandemic world, really, how do you see this relationship evolving?
Yes, India and Sweden, as you have said, have a very long-standing friendship, and our partnership has really intensified in the last few years. And this partnership is a very, very wide-ranging partnership, from business, technology, investment, all the way to working together on global issues of the day, be it climate change or disarmament in the past or decolonization. If we see the political engagement, His Majesty's visit to India in December 2019 was a very substantive one. And this was just a few months before the pandemic. Last year, despite the pandemic, there were a series of ministerial engagements, very substantive ones again. I think almost 7 or 8 ministerial engagements at different sectors. This year, I've been here for 6 months, and in the last 6 months alone, there has been a virtual summit between our prime ministers. Our commerce and trade ministers have talked to each other twice. And earlier this week, our defense ministers, along with the industry participants, were having a substantive discussion again. So the series of political level engagement shows the high level commitment. Despite pandemic, it is continuing. Sweden had announced its decision to join the International Solar Alliance recently. We've had good interactions in the India-EU summit. We are also working together on the lead IT. In the recent months, several Swedish big companies have also announced their investment decisions, further investment decisions into India, like Sandvik and Autoliv. So the business engagement is really intensifying. IKEA has opened another mega store. And these major Swedish companies, they have also been contributing very significantly to the ongoing COVID relief efforts in India. Companies like Volvo, IKEA, Ericsson, Truecaller, ABB, all of them have been contributing in their own fashion, and we greatly appreciate that. So the engagement is continuing. Our companies and universities are collaborating on many joint R&D projects, and these are really issues which are relevant today on sustainability, on climate change, on life sciences, where we again have a very long-standing collaboration. So as we move towards a post-pandemic situation, I think all the relevant areas that are there facing us, India and Sweden are having a good collaboration, and this engagement looks to be set for intensifying even further.
That's fantastic, Ambassador. Also, one of the key global issues that is talked about at Almedalen Week is climate change. And there are always ways and debates and discussions on how one can lead a more sustainable life, how can one reduce the carbon footprint of the world, really. In many ways, sustainability and a circular lifestyle is something which has been a part of the Indian ethos. How can India be a part of that thought leadership on circularity and on sustainability?
Climate change is indeed the top priority or top challenge facing humankind right now. And unless we all work together, it is unlikely to be managed. And if you see, there are many aspects to it. India has been at the forefront of both domestic action in terms of climate action and our global cooperation to take this fight forward. If we see really the issues such as environment protection, global warming, ozone depletion, they all came up in 1960s, started coming up. In 1972, Sweden in fact hosted the first UN conference on human environment. And India was the only country which was led, Indian delegation was led at the prime ministerial level. So both India and Sweden have a long record of being very active on these issues. It is not a recent issue for either of our countries. If we see in 1990s, when the global negotiations started on a convention, Indian negotiators were among the first to present a full draft text of a convention. If we come to 2015 COP, Paris COP, there again India made a very positive and significant contribution, which was well appreciated and recognized. Also in Paris, India with France launched the International Solar Alliance, which has really attracted a lot of membership. I think we have around 90 members now. And India and Sweden in 2019 September launched a Lead IT initiative, which is the leadership group on industry transition. So India has been, along with Sweden, very active on these issues for a long time. Now you mentioned the civilizational aspect of the whole circular economy and sustainability. If we see in Indian tradition, there is no dichotomy between nature and humanity or human beings. That's more a Western thought. So if you see, even a Western science now acknowledges things like feedback loops, carbon cycle, water cycle, all these things are linked. And Indian thought has always appreciated this web of life, this interdependence of the habitats of species of human species. These are not separate. So in our tradition, we have plants or trees who are sacred, animals or birds who are sacred. So there is a very fundamental understanding of how every being is dependent on each other. And at the same time, there is this tradition of sustainability, of reuse, recycle, trying to not go to the extremes. So those insights are already available, and they are there in the Indian tradition. And that is perhaps helping us when we now look at how to manage climate change.
So India and Sweden are at the helm of the leadership of industry transition. This was announced at the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019. Now, has the pandemic in any way impacted the course of action, and how do you see the pathways ahead in helping industries transform into cleaner energy industries?
Yes, again, India and Sweden had come together in September 2019 at the UN level to initiate this leadership group on industry transition. And this is really a group which is trying to see how we can encourage some of the industry stakeholders who are engaged in more polluting industries, how they can move towards cleaner technologies. This was launched in September 2019, and within 6 months, pandemic had started to take grip. But again, despite the COVID, there have been many developments in the lead IT process. I think in July last year, there was a industry transition day which was celebrated, and it helped generate awareness and advocacy internationally. Then there was ministerial interaction later in the year, where a joint ministerial statement was also issued. There were other stakeholder consultations. I know that, for instance, in India, there were extensive consultations with the industry players by our Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change to encourage them to take action and move towards cleaner technologies. Recently, when President Biden had hosted the Climate Leaders Summit, there they announced the decision of the US to join this group also. And now the membership has grown to, I think, around 31, which contains both countries and the companies, and includes France, Germany, UK, Austria, Republic of Korea, and many other countries. So there is a clear trend. This has been only 1.5 years so far, but there is a recognition among the policy makers and the private players that this is the way to go, and this makes also business sense besides a climate change impact.
Engaging India at Almedalen Week is a marquee event for future urbanisms at the Uppsala University and Zero City. Now, what is the potential that you see for a collaborative approach when it comes to collaborative research, collaborative academic studies, institutions coming together, and collaboration at a government and corporate stakeholdership level for creating cleaner economies and restoring an ecological balance?
I think there is no other way forward but collaboration, and we are really talking about issues which affect us all. The future of our next generation, so to say. So no longer people can work in silos, whether they are universities or government agencies or industries, because cooperation from everybody is required to make progress. So while the government agencies can lay down the guidelines, facilitate interaction, enable an environment in which business can be done, similarly the fundamental research and breakthroughs in technology come from universities, and the private players are the ones who can use that to scale up the interventions. So these collaborations are what is the need of the hour, and this is increasingly happening both in India and Sweden and between our countries. If we look at Sweden, there is of course the triple helix model, which is very well known, and there is very, very seamless cooperation between all these various stakeholders. And increasingly in India also, you will find that, especially in the last year and a half, you see universities coming up with quick breakthroughs and solutions, which are then, let's say, the investors are there to take the process forward, and the government is also very, very keenly encouraging, either by way of seed money for these research projects and so on. And between India and Sweden, as I mentioned, there are any number of joint industrial R&D collaborative projects which are going ahead for many, many important areas: smart cities, smart grids, clean technology in water, e-mobility. So this collaboration is obviously needed, and it is increasingly growing.
One of the backbones of innovation in India has been its ability to scale and scale at speed. However, one can always learn from other countries. What are the takeaways that you feel that one can pick up, and learnings one can pick up from Sweden, especially when it comes to the innovation ecosystem, when it comes to startups, and when it comes to sustainability-driven ecosystems?
Yes, I mean, you mentioned how the Indian uniqueness in certain ways is about the ability to scale up very quickly. And that is happening in many, many different areas. I think one example which immediately comes to mind is the financial inclusion process, which is very relevant for the development progress of India. And there, if we see, we've been able to incorporate the whole process of biometric ID cards for more than 1 billion people in a very short time. The issuance or the opening of new bank accounts for the unbanked people from poorer and vulnerable sections, women, and the use of smartphones. So while combining all these three different processes, substantial financial inclusion has been achieved in a very, very short time, which has been acknowledged the world over. So innovations like this, either in processes or in technology, are really changing, bringing about transformational change. Whether they are using, for example, in the recent months, breakthroughs relating to medical equipment or diagnostics or ventilators, or artificial intelligence-based social media interface platforms. They are really able to upscale the interventions very, very quickly. So that's the uniqueness which we can find in India. But of course, we can try and see what the others are also doing in a good way, and in fact, many better processes. And then again, if we look at Sweden, the triple helix model is where there is a lot of synergy already existing. And in India, it is now building up. So that is a way to go. We have to learn from this. Also, Sweden is among the top countries when it comes to innovation. And that has to do with many factors, and how the ecosystem of innovation is and then startups is done here. And I think, based on my limited experience here, one thing is that it is safe to fail. So the entrepreneurs can take risks, which is really needed for implementing innovations and startups. And safe to fail means that you have the basic requirements taken care of, and you don't have to worry as to whether you suffer a loss or it fails. Then what happens? So that allows people to come out and really dare to innovate. And this is also increasingly happening in India, and government agencies are providing seed money, are providing other facilities for the ecosystem to grow. And India is also rapidly coming up in the innovation parameters. We are among the top 50 now, and have really jumped up several notches in the last couple of years. So there's always good to see what others are doing well, and then to try and incorporate that if possible.
Indian leadership has often requested the world to look at India from a civilizational lens. If one looks at India's contribution to the world over centuries, whether it is the concept of zero, or whether it is plastic surgery or how it started, one can say that India has been an open source nation, if I may call it that, over centuries. How does the civilizational perspective really facilitate the world to engage with India from a more strategic perspective?
Very interesting question, I must say. Well, I mean, if you look at India, what, for example, immediately comes to mind is 1/6 of humanity. And whatever there are, let's say, global issues, whether they are climate change or peace and security or pandemic or any big issues, I think whatever India contributes has global relevance. So that's a fact. Now, if we see, you talked about the civilizational context, and India is one of the very few ancient civilizations. So we have been, this civilization has been there for a very long time, millennia. And there has been a consciousness about India in among the other civilizations and other peoples from millennia. So breakthroughs in faiths or new spiritual thought or mathematics or calculus or metallurgy or astronomy, all these were known outside India. There are several well-recorded instances of scholars from other, you could call civilizations or societies, coming to India to study and to see how things were being done. There are ancient universities of Takshila and Nalanda where there were thousands of scholars studying at a point of time and from all over the world. India was a major economy till a few hundred years ago. India was among the dominant economies. That again was a magnet for others. There were many things which which made India stand out in those centuries. If you see now, after independence again, we are now a very fast growing economy, a major economy. We have scientific breakthroughs to our scientists have been able to send rockets to the moon and Mars. We have working with nuclear technology, biotechnology, IT. All these things are, again, things which are of relevance when you talk about the strategic engagement and so on. And there is a continuity. India was a maritime power earlier, and India again has a good maritime strength. We are able to provide assistance whenever there is required in our, for example, extended neighborhood. So all these, there has been a continuity in terms of the civilizational ethos, thoughts, and how we are perceived now. If you look at some of the major breakthroughs in recent times, like human rights or gender equality, again, these have been embedded in the Indian civilizational thought. Gender equality, there was always in the Indian tradition equality among the two, among the male and the female aspect. If you see, when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was being adopted, even a year before our independence, the Indian delegate, Mrs. Hansa Mehta, was the one who introduced, who replaced the words that all men are equal or born free and equal to all human beings. Yeah. And those are very transformational changes, and they have guided future constitutions, future other such declarations. If we look at other debates through recent decades, decolonization, anti-apartheid, a fairer equity and economic system, climate change, vaccine equity, all these are very relevant, and they come from a civilizational ethos of wanting good for everybody and having no discrimination. I could even also mention the International Day of Yoga, which is coming up very soon. So there is a widespread recognition of these thoughts and these values which have defined India for a very long time. If we look at our development partnership efforts with solidarity with our partners in Africa and many other nations, developing countries, we have worked with them according to their priorities, because we share similar experiences and we do not work with any conditions. So these are different models. So and this is, I think, recognized very well. You take the Indian diaspora, 30 million strong Indian diaspora, and these are all our ambassadors. And they tell people outside India about the Indian professionalism, Indian ability to work, to coexist peacefully. So these are all, I think, civilizational ethos and values which have always been there. And whether it is at a personal level or a broader level between societies or on fundamental issues, I think our contribution and participation has always been there. And perhaps it's very difficult to find any other country of this size, 1/6 of humanity we just spoke about, a major economy, a major technological power, and such a diverse country which is moving ahead in a democratic setup. So this in itself makes strategic sense perhaps for interaction with how others perceive perhaps India and how we can move forward.
Right, and talking about moving forward, Ambassador, during the World Environment Day, the Foreign Minister did write about a greener foreign policy for India. Could you elaborate on the greener foreign policy?
Yes, so again, we discussed that sustainability and climate change are really real issues which we all of us have to work upon. And India has always been very, very active in terms of domestic and international engagement. Now, and this is not for any other interest, but we know that it is in our interest to do so, and also everybody's interest to collaborate upon. So that's the fundamental premise. Now, if we look at the things that are going on in India, there's really transformational in terms of cleaner energy transition and sustainability practices that are being introduced. So we have committed very, very strongly, including at the Paris COP, and we have been raising the ambition of our climate action very, very significantly. And now we hope to implement or achieve a capacity of renewable energy of 450 gigawatt by 2030. It's a very big number, and it will really transform our situation and have an impact internationally. Again, we talked about the scale. So when we talk about, let's say, adoption of LEDs in India, it is almost equivalent to 40 million tons of carbon dioxide emission reduction every year. In recent years, 80 million new households are being provided cooking gas, for example. So that's cleaner, smoke-free kitchens and reduce the pollution. International Solar Alliance, afforestation at the domestic level, or trying to reverse the biodiversity loss. The numbers of tigers and lions in India is really, and elephants is increasing. At an international level, of course, the International Solar Alliance, the LEAD IT, we are also working on the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, again, which has relevance to this. And these memberships are expanding. So many areas we are working on. And if you see the multilateral environment agreements, so whether it is UNEP or not UNEP, but UNCCD or the Convention on Migratory Species, India is currently the president of the Conference of Parties on such initiatives or such multilateral agreements, and where we are contributing very significantly to the advocacy and to the way forward. So we are playing a part. And if we now look at, let's say, our development partnership, I spoke briefly upon how it depends on the priorities of our partners. In my previous station, we implemented the launch of a public transport system, and the new metro was inaugurated in 2019. That is a big transformation for all the parties concerned. It reduces congestion, it reduces the carbon emissions, and it is the first time that Indian companies have been able to implement a metro project outside. We are working very closely with many partners on solar energy programs, on wind energy programs. Many of the important buildings that are being constructed with partners are clean and energy efficient buildings. So all these things are now built in, and these aspects of how to have a more sustainable solution or train people for sustainability practices or have impact on the global warming issues. So whether you see domestically international initiatives or our development partnership efforts, these are moving towards very clearly towards a greener and cleaner technology issues, and that is what I think it is meant when we say that we are moving towards greener foreign policy, and there is no contradiction because our domestic and external actions are in sync in that. So I think that is the way to go.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador, for sharing these fantastic insights and having such an open conversation with me here at the Almedalen Week's epicenter, really. This is a celebration of open thought, of collaboration, of democracy, and India and Sweden go a long way in celebrating that. So thank you so much, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, for that interview and some fantastic insights. I am going to pull a few threads from the Ambassador's interview on sustainability, climate action, and circularity. Though, first, I would like to head to India and introduce our panelist, Professor Satya Chakravarti, who is with the Indian Institute of Science, an advisor to Avishkar Hyperloop, and really a force behind that. We are very excited to hear about that, Professor Satya. Let me also move on to Sujit Nair, the founder of Beacon. And he is working in the space of open mobility and open digital protocol solutions. I'm going to head straight to London now, where Anirudh Jain is joining us. He is the Chief Innovation Officer and heads the startup ecosystem of Deloitte India. A lot of exciting work happening in that space as well, Neeraj. And back to Sweden with Dr. Per Arne, who is the head of the Office of Science and Innovation at the Embassy of Sweden in India. Also joining us is Professor Uwe Ronström from Uppsala University and Dr. Swaminathan, Director of Sustainability and Social Impact at Deloitte India, as well as a researcher at Uppsala University. Of course, I will be coming back to you all raising questions, but we also have a very special guests for this year for Engaging India at Almedalen Future Urbanisms. We are really honored to be joined by Uday Shankar, the president of India's largest and oldest industry body, FICCI, or the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Well, he's on a flight back to India as we speak. He was to join us live, but a last minute cancelled flight and now on a flight back to India. However, he did ensure that he sends us his opening address that reaches us on time. So Uday Shankar, of course, shares the industry perspective on avenues of cooperation on sustainable initiatives and innovation between Sweden and India.
Hello. His Excellency Indian Ambassador to Sweden, Mr. Tanmaya Lal, His Excellency Ambassador of Sweden to India, Mr. Claes Molin, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a privilege to speak to you at the Almedalen Week, where India made its debut in 2019. India and Sweden share a close relationship based on shared values of democracy, pluralism, equality, freedom of speech, and respect for human rights. The relationship between the two countries that was established in 1948 been strengthened over the decades. Even during 2020, despite the pandemic disruption, there were 8 substantive ministerial interactions. The robust cooperation between the two countries sees a regular exchange of official and business delegations, with around 40 delegations at ministerial or senior official levels. FICCI also had the privilege of leading a business delegation accompanying Minister Piyush Goyal to Sweden in 2016. The strategic convergence in recent times has resulted in robust cooperation between the two countries in various regional and international fora. Trade and investment between India and Sweden have grown rapidly in recent years. India is the 3rd largest trading partner for Sweden in Asia. The number of Swedish companies with business presence in India has increased from around 150 to around 250 in the last 5 years or so. Virtual summit in March 2021 have proven to be turning points in expanding and strengthening strategic cooperation between our two great countries. The dialogues have resulted in an enhanced impetus for further consolidation of strategic convergence between the two countries on issues related to climate change, sustainability, science and technology, startup innovation, medical innovation, defense, counterterrorism, peace and security, and industry integration. Worldwide, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought a heightened level of consciousness to is an opportune time for organizations, especially for business and industry, to evaluate how they can build businesses resilient to global or local crises. It demands that everyone calibrate their businesses' long-term strategies to build in the risk-related matrix that would help them to shield against future shocks in the system quickly. It applies equally, if not more, to environmental and climate emergency. The emerging global challenges, including these arising out of the COVID-19 pandemic, provide opportunities for both the nations to be committed to work together and strengthen cooperation on a number of mutually beneficial priorities. I dare say that it is a great time for heightened cooperation in innovation and clean technology for sustainable development and effective climate action. Both the countries have strong commitment, concern, and have undertaken robust initiatives towards environmental safeguard. India's leadership role in International Solar Alliance is evident of India's commitment for promoting research and development and partnership to enhance the share of solar energy globally, and Sweden's decision to join the ISA is a vital development that speaks of our synergy in harnessing clean energy. Indian business and industry are beginning to engage with the concept of circular economy. However, even with efficient technological solutions, the challenge to scale up continues to exist. There are successful business models in India, particularly in waste and water, which can be replicated and scaled up. Sweden can facilitate technology transfer, capacity building, financial innovation, and pilot projects. It can contribute to developing the market and ecosystem, especially for solid and wastewater management and sustainable mobility in India. Another area of focus for FICCI is urban wastewater. India Industry Water Conclave to showcase their technological expertise in this sphere. We assure you that it's a great platform for discovering new opportunities in India. Given that India has only about 4% of the world's renewable water resources, but 18% of the world's population, there is a severe water stress across the board, be it groundwater or the river basins. Yet, about 78% of the sewage remains untreated in India. That makes sewage treatment and reuse a tremendous opportunity for those exploring such opportunities in India. I believe that Sweden can be a great partner for India and the Indian industry in reshaping the efficiency and reuse models of water. Wastewater management is another potentially transformational area of collaboration between the two countries. India's government has streamlined regulations for all kinds of waste management and utilization. This provides a greater impetus to the creation of a market for waste management in India. Sweden has been a trailblazer when it comes to waste management and is a powerhouse of innovation, sustainability, co-creation, and equality. Hence, this could be another area where India could benefit from the knowledge, research, and innovation possessed by Sweden. India, in return, can offer scale, entrepreneurial spirit of the people to build new technologies in a cost-effective manner. Collaborations in research and innovation are the natural way forward. Friends, Sweden and India could work together towards scaling up of technologies and business models that are innovative for addressing the waste. There has been an effort to encourage alternative usage of plastic waste. Sweden can help in the technology and know-how for sustainable alternatives to plastic and sustainable use plastic waste. In the area of electrical and electronic waste, where India is the 5th largest generator of these wastes. Sweden's leadership in sustainable and safe mobility is highly acknowledged. FICCI is working hard to promote the ecosystem for sustainable mobility in India. We launched the India Roadmap on low carbon to medium-term and long-term approach to sustainable mobility for India. We believe sustainable mobility is a strong area of collaboration between the private sector of our two countries to spur innovation towards a low-carbon mobility ecosystem. India and Sweden are the co-chairs of the Leadership Group for Industry Transition, launched during the United Secretary General's Climate Action Summit in 2019 as a commitment towards low-carbon industry transition. India and Sweden can pave the way for collaborative sustainable innovation and industry transition for the globe by establishing the frameworks for building industry preparedness towards low-carbon transition, especially for the medium, small, and micro enterprises, that is, MSMEs in countries like India. Sustainable finance will be an important pillar for advancing industrial transition in countries like India to leapfrog technology to enable MSMEs to make the transition to finance solutions for hard-to-abate sectors to support innovative business models. FICCI is working with the private financial industry and the government, both flows international capital to sustainability-linked projects in India. The FICCI report on accelerating post-pandemic economic recovery with clean energy infrastructure and jobs in India, released this April, identified 600 shovel-ready projects in the pipeline in areas such as utility-scale solar and wind, rooftop solar, energy storage batteries manufacturing, solar panels manufacturing, and others that are investable and can play a transformative role in our low-carbon transition. A collaboration with Sweden to identify innovative financial mechanisms for enabling Swedish investors to widen their portfolio in Indian projects will be a strong step forward in establishing Sweden's role in sustainable finance for enabling transition in India. I hope this forum will help to heighten the synergies and interdependencies that will lead to enhanced and mutually beneficial partnerships. I hope we'll be able to fruitful engagement and widen the scope of commonly agreed agenda on environmental and climate action of both the countries to bring transformative ideas and practical solutions and show the way forward for business and industry. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Well, that was the note from the president of the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, Mr. Uday Shankar. Thank you, Team FICCI, who is watching us live, for ensuring that the recording reaches us on time. Now, as we move on to the panel discussion, I would like to start with Professor Uwe Ronstrom, who's also the co-organizer of Engaging India at Almedalen Future Urbanisms. Professor Uwe, you have been researching and teaching on sustainability and sustainable destinations, as well as future urbanisms. Sweden and India have very different contexts, yet we are so interconnected, and the pandemic has shown us that. From a sustainability and an urbanization lens, what does co-thinking in this changing world really mean, especially from unexpected global events?
Yes, I will bring up some issues around this. And I will start to say that we are, who arranged these seminars, we are situated in Campus Gotland. It's in the town of Visby, just next to Almedalen, as you heard. Here, the entire Swedish political leadership has been gathering this week throughout 50 years or more to discuss politics, business, and social issues. And this year, it is, of course, all done through internet, which has given us new opportunities to reach out to the world, and so we did. One may ask, actually, and I think that's what you asked about, Rupali, one may ask what we in Gotland, this island with 60,000 inhabitants in the Swedish pleasure periphery, have to do with what is happening in the Swedish mainland, or for that matter, with what is going on in the entire Indian subcontinent. What comes to mind is, of course, an image of the ant inviting elephants to a dance. But if there's one thing that our work with sustainability issues has taught us, it is precisely that even the smallest ants can become or be good dance partners, also for the biggest of elephants. And sustainability is an issue that comes with a certain capacity to turn habitual arrangements and common mental maps upside down. Indeed, it is an issue that actually requires us to create maps that connect the world of us ants in Gotland, if you wish, with the worlds of elephants in the mainlands over the world and vice versa. Ultimately, sustainability is about, of course, the whole world, not specific places, islands, cities, countries, or continents, and not about specific um, issues. It's about the whole thing, actually. The whole world in all directions, from deep down in the underworld to the of the oceans and to the outer limits of the biosphere. Sustainability, yes, it's about innovation, technology, economy, urbanization, and more. But it is also much more than that. In a recent news article, the Swedish author Mats Söderlund argues that the climate crisis is neither an economical or a technological crisis. It is a crisis of culture and mentality. What we urgently need, he thinks, is new ways to perceive and communicate what is ahead of us, new mental images and maps of a future world not to be afraid of, but to long for and strive for. And of course, many times before, people have done precisely this, redrawn their mental maps, their mindscapes, and each time this has had significant geopolitical consequences through art, music, dance, literature, and poetry. All the major religions created new large-scale cognitive maps and cognitive spaces which allowed abstract entities such as the Muslim world or the Hindu world or Christianity to take concrete form. And we still live with the geopolitical consequences of these creative, mind-blowing fantasies. And Europeans' discovery of America led to a subversive expansion of the mindscapes of the world, of course, and to a whole new geopolitical world regime. And in another example, in the 20th century, the labor movement under the motto "Workers in all countries unite," this movement created new maps that led to completely new alliances with significant geopolitical consequences all around. And you could easily find your own examples. But today, I think we live in the aftermath of the first images of the Earth taken by the astronauts, images of this little defenseless little blue globe in a huge black empty universe. And as a companion to these mind-blowing images, globalization soon became the buzzword of the day. A buzzword that clearly came with the capacity to produce what it names, a cognitive map of a new world, and to that a number of geopolitical consequences, a whole new world order for better and for worse. And now I will argue that it seems that as though we are required to take yet a few more steps in the same direction. For whatever globalization has come to mean, the result is to my mind at least, clearly too one-dimensional or one-sided. What we need is, again, new words and maps that can encompass the world as a multidimensional whole. What we need, I suggest, is what I would call a biospherization. A biospherization that will allow us to embrace this whole little blue defenseless globe in all its entirety. And in fact, there are signs that something like a biospherization might actually be going on around the world. For one thing, take all the attempts to introduce legal biotope protection, which just a few decades would have been almost impossible. In some places, also, the boundary between humans and animals are now actively redrawn, as when killing of polar bears in Svalbard here is legally equated with the killing of humans. In other places, the boundary between nature and culture is redrawn, as when Wanganui River in New Zealand has been given legal status as a non-human personhood. The river is thus no longer a human resource, as in ecosystem services, but a more than human being with legal rights. And as Indians here, the Indian audience here might know that Ganges and Yamuna rivers in India has also been granted legal status as some kind of non-human persons. And this to remake the border between human and non-human, culture and nature, is no small thing, since such borders constitute the very foundation of what we know as culture and society. So maybe the examples I mentioned are just some changes in the margin, but they can also mark the beginning of a biospherization, new ways of being in the world, as the phenomenologists may phrase it. And at the same time, leaning on and producing new mental maps. In that case, as before, this will have culture and geopolitical consequences. I would like to believe that one such consequences is that it will be completely obvious to us all how we, the small ants in Visby, Gotland, are able to dance nicely also with the big elephants in Stockholm, Delhi, or Bombay, and that we are, in fact, of course, close neighbors. It is precisely in this light that I and my colleagues here in Uppsala University Campus Gotland would like to invite you, panelists and all listeners, to this seminar and to the other 3 seminars the following, on what Sweden and India can learn from each other, how we can co-think sustainability, urbanization, and technology in a post-COVID world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Uday, and you have a lovely blue glow in your video, and I think that is making what you are saying even more sort of exciting, because we're trying to see, okay, what are your expressions, what are you saying? But we'll fix that video for you. But coming to you, Neeraj, as the innovations head of Deloitte in India, I understand that your team with Swaminathan has been working on co-thinking as a key value proposition, especially towards co-creation, towards co-development, towards collaboration. From the point of view of sustainability and reducing our planetary carbon footprint, how do you visualize co-thinking?
So thank you so much, Rupali. And to build on what Uday said, the thought process is all there. The mental maps, the need to realign, etc. I completely get it. What we strongly believe in, and this is thanks to the thought process that has been going on in Visby and Gotland, for that matter, is that the key building blocks that are required for us to make an exponential change as far as carbon footprint is concerned are already there. And the need of the hour, just like Uday was saying, to draw the mental maps, I think to kind of put it in some other context, is to redraw and relook into what is it that is going in today as processes and sub-processes, which is allowing us to lead the life that we are leading today. And we believe that if we look at that map and we look at all what has already been discovered, we can actually re-engineer the processes and sub-processes right at the source. We can appeal to each and every individual, the 8 billion of us on the planet, to live a more sustainable life. But today, if the choices to lead those sustainable life emanate from some large corporations, decisions that are made by industries and sectors, is there an opportunity for us right at the source to inculcate that change in a business and societal friendly manner? And the answer to that, I think, is a yes. And hence, when it comes to co-thinking, building on what the ambassador was saying, the triple helix model, we believe that there is a role, there is an opportunity for an orchestration process which helps bring these building blocks together such that a sustainable environment, a sustainable carbon footprint in so-called very unfriendly industries as well can be attempted and achieved in a very time-bound manner. So that's really how we think and how we are thinking of co-thinking with academia, obviously with industry participation. And of course, the governments and the regulators will have a huge role to play in disciplining us, in making sure that we adopt it and give birth to this, a very, I would say, a sustainable world in the very near future. So that's really what we are thinking. We are dreamers, Rupali, in some sense, but we do believe that there is a possibility that we could actually, just like someone said, right? Give me a lever and I will lift the earth, right? So similarly, we believe that we have all the tools available which can kind of yield this outcome.
And in fact, let's take it from the corporate and the consulting angle, and also put it back into academia. And I would like to bring in Professor Satya here. Professor Satya, I'd like to reintroduce you as a professor with IIT Madras. I believe I might have said IISc before this, but Professor Satya is with IIT Madras. One of the stated aims for engaging India at Almedalen Future Urbanisms, Professor, is also to facilitate an updated understanding of both contexts, the Indian context as well as the Swedish context. When we talk about co-thinking on sustainability and technology, how do you think Sweden and the world in general can start engaging with India in the backdrop of a push for cleaner and greener innovations? And perhaps you might like to give us an example, an anecdotal example from perhaps the Avishkar Hyperloop as the starting point. Professor, I think you are on mute as well. You might have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Very clear. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Rupali. Thank you for that introduction as well. And thanks for having me on this panel. I think it's now very evident that pretty much a lot of other countries, Sweden in this context very particularly, that should be really interested in India, because as the ambassador said, that we are actually 1/6 of the humanity. And if whatever we do is actually going to affect the rest of the world. And it is very important that everybody watches us and make sure that we do the right things going into the 21st century, and not do the same things as what has happened in the last century that has been sort of inhibiting on the planet, right? So is it possible for us to do a mid-course correction that India will embrace and maybe even lead, if possible, that everybody else should enable? Because I think the lever that Neeraj was talking about is among maybe China and India, we have it in India's hands, right? Because we can actually lift the world, because we are actually a big chunk of the world. So it's very important that everybody else should watch us do the right thing and enable us do the right thing, because that's going to impact a lot of the humanity. I think that's what this conversation is all about. So let me give you an example of how that might happen in the context of the Avishkar Hyperloop work that we are doing, and try to illustrate some of the important things that come out of that example, as well as how Sweden could help us with this process, right? So here we are talking about what I am actually coming around to saying as the intercity metro, right? So we are now talking about going from city to city in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, right? That kind of time, which is sort of like the time it takes for you to cross one city within a city, that is, across a city in a metro. So we want to now say, is it possible for me to go from Chennai to Bangalore in 15 minutes, Bangalore to Mumbai in 20 minutes, Mumbai to Delhi in about 20, 30 minutes, and so on. And this is obviously talking about going much faster than airplanes and with much less infrastructure, right? Now, it would seem like a Hyperloop, as we are talking about here, is actually going to cost a lot of infrastructure. And that's one of those things that I have personally been very worried about all the time. So one of the things that I have been doing with the Avishkar Hyperloop student team that has been embracing Hyperloop since about 2017, and being the only Asian team in 2019 to make it to the SpaceX competition with on their pod run. And are, as a matter of fact, participating with Deloitte's sponsorship, I should add, at the European Hyperloop Week later this month, I think a couple of weeks from now, or maybe next week, I think. And this is going to happen in Valencia, Spain, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we are doing this online. And I think they're going to do the pod unveiling happen this particular weekend, right? This upcoming weekend. But what is important here is what happens to the vacuum tube that has to actually run, which kind of creates a very small space-like environment that Elon Musk had actually conceived in 2013 with a white paper, where you're evacuating this and removing air friction as well as wheel friction by levitating and going very fast faster than airplanes, right? So that could actually be very, very expensive. And that is exactly where we have done significant amount of innovation. And I'm very happy to report that we have now a structural design that we are planning to implement in our new campus for about 0.5 kilometer that promises to actually offer the cost of Hyperloop to be about 1/5 of what is the international cost that is being put out, as well as it's actually about 1/6 or 1/7 of what the current high-speed rail cost, right? So with that kind of disruption, right, what we are essentially talking about is India is now poised to join the rest of the world, particularly the Western world, in bringing in technologies that are much less expensive, as well as much more sustainable. So here we are not only reducing the cost like what we are used to doing, but typically what ISRO used to do, and ISRO definitely has so some of the feathers to its cap on innovation itself, in addition to the frugal engineering that they have so well exhibited, right? Here we have a situation where we can actually excel in the technology as well as bring down the cost. So that arbitrage is no longer just a cost arbitrage, but also technological excellence. And that's what we would like to actually showcase to the rest of the world and get Sweden to participate. In this particular instance, I would actually urge if we can get Volvo to come in with us for helping us with the pod, because that's one of those very straightforward things that I can think of.
Right. Thanks, Professor. In fact, we do have Dr. Per Arne here, and I'm going to bring him into the conversation as well. An open offer there, Per Arne, so perhaps after this conversation, you might like to take it up. But you have been an academic who is now at a crucial and important role in the Swedish government, and one that is focused on science and innovation. How has Sweden managed to align this academia, innovation, industry interactions and engagements for creating new technologies and innovations? Because it seems to have worked, it seems to have directly benefited the people for decades.
Okay, thank you, Rupali, and thank you for having me here today. Well, that's a complicated question. I think it's in one way maybe it's an easy one, but in other aspects it's a difficult one to answer. But I'll give it a try. First of all, I would like to address maybe what Ambassador Lal said earlier on, which I think is one of the key aspects that you have to consider when you try to answer this question, and that is that I think that in Sweden and in India we have a similarity in terms of how we view the planet, this blue thing that we talked about earlier on. In a way that we have some sort of ecological sensitivity that we share in both India and Sweden, and so I guess that's one of the reasons it might be easier for us to have this kind of collaboration, because we have this stance based on mutual respect and the importance of that, and I think that the pandemic shows us that the pandemic or global crises of other kinds are both ecological, economical, and social in different aspects that you have to consider. So that's one thing that I think that Sweden has. That's a way that Sweden approaches innovation and science in this sustainability from a sustainability perspective. The stance that everything is interdependent. Another one that I think that from an academic point of view is that we always have an idea of reciprocity, which also actually is something that may be an explanation why it will be so easy to work together with India, because the standpoint that we've had here, we've heard a lot of code words, collaboration, co-creation, and all that. But that's also something that Sweden is known for, in the way that Sweden works. Academia, industry, government, society, always there is a stance that is built on reciprocity, and that it will be good for everyone. I think that the Sweden-India Innovation Partnership is a really good example of that on a bilateral viewpoint. And then maybe another area which could explain why it works in Sweden, and that is that we have an emphasis on building infrastructure. I'm the first to say that, well, as you know, Sweden is ranked at the top level in terms of innovation globally, but I don't think that is an explanation. I think an explanation to why Sweden succeeds in terms of innovation and science is that we have an ambition to stay committed, to be determined, to always try to pioneer things. We want to pioneer the possible is something that we talk about today, and I think that is something that we share with India as well. That we want to, the idea of always continue to stay determined, to pioneer and to make things possible. I think that's one of the reasons why it works. We have a lot of challenges in terms of science and innovation in Sweden, connecting different infrastructures within Sweden. And we also have a big challenge and a great possibility when it comes to collaborating with India. I mean, India is, we heard a lot of descriptions now of the situation and the possibilities connected with the Indian setting or the context. And I will not go into that more, but I think this is a really, really interesting context, the Sweden-India innovation scientific context in terms of establishing progress and to pioneer the possible. So I think I'll stop there and thank you.
Well, thanks, Dr. Pararne. I'm also going to bring in Sujit into this conversation where we are talking about inventions and innovations and collaborations and, sort of thinking beyond the box. Also thinking for a planetary scale. Sujit, you have played a leading role in rolling out India's first integrated common mobility card. You're now founder and CEO of Beacon. Nandan Nilekani is the co-founder, and that's impressive, of course, simply because he has this reputation of backing ideas that can be truly global. How do you think the Indian innovation ecosystem has changed in over the last few years? And perhaps we could also begin with the case of what is your core idea of mobility, and how is that kind of being tied in with innovation and with co-thinking?
Thanks, Rupali. Absolutely delighted to be here, and thanks for that great question. So I think before I talk about the work we are doing with Beacon in mobility, I think in the context of what I just heard from all the eminent speakers here, in the context of both sustainability and the way of living at a civilization scale, the Professor Uday was talking about, obviously it's a very broad multidimensional canvas. But I think there are two inexorable realities that I can point to, maybe a little corner of that mental map. One is, of course, the reality of urbanization and that speed at which is happening, especially in countries like India. And the second is the consequential reality of mobility and the dependence on mobility, right? And I think Professor Satya's points about the new form and the new technology of mobility to answer some of these big, large-scale, population-scale problems could be an answer to sustainability in some dimension. And I think in this context, I think what Beacon as an idea we're trying to do is to rethink the another inexorable reality of the whole pervasiveness of digital. And I think the pandemic only amplified that reality in our lives, more so for the small businesses, for the driver entrepreneurs, and even for the large transit systems that operate the city. I think clearly, I think while there was a well-recognized need that cities must move away from being designed around cars to start designing around people, and then mobility should be shared and common but better, of course. I think the role of digital is increasingly pervasive in that dialogue, and I think mobility today is a digital service, right? However, the nature of digital, it's kind of been and the nature of digital that can drive this adoption has been a little complicated one. I think if you look at the whole digital commerce model of internet seems to be having a different kind of an evolution than the very internet itself. If you look at internet, which is a public innovation, DARPA, government of US funded digital infrastructure, open at its core and its values, and had this age of innocence and growing through, as Nandan puts it. But I think somewhere the age of commerce took a very different model where I think they created a bit of a rite of passage. Largely because of lack of business models in internet, it became like a more of an advertisement-led model, which made small businesses, especially mobility businesses, to kind of grapple with this reality of going online with digital, right? And that's where this rite of passage comes from, with this model that exists around commerce, the model that exists around the whole digital mobility ecosystems across, not just in India, but across the world. And the premise is very simple. The premise being that both the buyer and seller of products and services, including mobility services, have to be on the same platform, and the platform of an intermediary who seems to have a bit of an influence and control and may not always have the incentives aligned to that of a buyer and a seller. Now, with that kind of a construct, it kind of puts a certain amount of pressure, a sense of loss of control and agency on the small businesses, especially in the driver ecosystems and the mobility ecosystems, kind of almost like a Faustian bargain where, especially after pandemic, where the only way to procure business is going online, and yet you have to go through this model of kind of subscribing to the rules and policies of a different player on which you're trying to do your own business to find customers. So I think what Becken questions that premise and saying, is there a possible complementary or an alternative model which can probably bring back retain agency to the small businesses, especially mobility companies, and allow them to innovate and flourish in the physical world as much as they did in physical world on the digital world as well. And that's where backend as an idea, it's a very simple idea. In fact, it goes back to the very tenets of the design of internet or the email itself. Today, when we exchange emails, we don't ask each other the question between the sender and receiver as to which email platform you're using. You're pretty much open to use any email platform. You can exchange emails with pretty much anyone. And that's possible because of this open network of email that comes in with no person or a platform in the middle trying to control that. And it's all happening because of this open protocols that exist, both in email with SMTP and with the web itself, which is HTTP. So we were thinking, is it possible, therefore, to create a similar open protocol, a specification as a digital public good, free for all, owned by all, that can unbundle this construct of a model where the buyer and seller have to be on the same platform, and instead allow them the choice to be on any platform, and yet discover each other quite naturally and do the business with more control and no loss of agency. And that's where this very lightweight, minimalistic design as backend came into picture. And this is kind of rooted in the whole Indian context of the way of innovation, the way digital revolution is happening in India, right from India going from 100 million people not having a document ID, unlike the other developed countries, to having a 21st century state-of-the-art digital ID on cloud, which is portable across multiple platforms where I can verify my ID with very minimalistic data. Okay, that evolution and the offsprings of several other such evolutions that happened after that. That's UPI, which is clocking about 2.8 billion transactions last month, digital transactions with over 200 million people doing digital payments. I think that leapfrog has this model of building a very minimalistic design, a digital public infrastructure, a digital public good, just like internet and GPS, and allowing for innovation to happen on these open infrastructure and drive some of this big innovation that looks at inclusive and scale, and allowing for some of these small businesses, especially in mobility ecosystem, to participate in a manner where they don't lose control. I think that's an innovation where I'm sure there's opportunity for a global collaboration to take this idea forward, which is why it's an open community ecosystem-based development of these standards that we're looking at with Beacon Protocol. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of relevance and contextual relevance even in countries like Sweden.
Right, that's very interesting. And you also spoke about having the innovation actually on digital public goods, and having that kind of access is also one of the key factors in sustainability, isn't it? Because we are talking about equal access and leading to equal opportunity, leading to equal services, and getting sort of being in a place where there is not so much of a disparity. I'm coming now to Dr. Swaminathan. Swami, you occupy an interesting space between academia and industry, especially from a multidisciplinary lens. Now, if we are to truly co-think our way into a more sustainable way of life, if we are to co-think on innovation that leads to sustainability, sometimes we may also have to look into our past. Neeraj did mention that Neeraj and you are also working on evolving a platform where the Indian concept of shunya and zero is at the core thought. And now this is something which is also being looked at from an academic point of view at Campus Gotland, along with Professor Uday. Now, can you tell us a little bit about that? How are you bringing the concept of circularity and shunya into the sustainability and innovation debate?
Thank you, Rupali. I think it's been a fascinating discussion till now, and I'm truly thankful for all the insightful conversations that we've had now. So, if I'll try and answer that question possibly in three ways, 2 or 3 ways. One is that if one starts with what Uday brought about, the fact that can we get to a place where the ants and the elephants, so to speak, are able to dance together? So, I think the important point that Uday is bringing to the table is that size and scale are no longer the same anymore. The size could be an elephant, and the ant could be a scale. Because if you have 100 ants put together and you've got one elephant, I think that in itself brings in a different kind of a business logic to it. That's one point that I would like to bring to the table. The second point that I think Neeraj brought about is about orchestration. So I think the work that needs to happen in different silos, in different departments, and different kinds of innovations are already taking place, right? So for instance, what Professor Satya is doing in Avishkar Hyperloop, it's not just innovation, but it's also going ahead and doing something in a manner that makes it affordable to the people around, so that it is scalable in many ways. And it is very critical for a country like India to look at size and scale separately and actually focus a lot more on scale, so that whatever happens in India, whatever is rolled out in India, as everybody said, 1/6 of the humanity, is going to have a direct implication on how it gets rolled out all across the world.
Right.
The third point which is brought about by Dr. Pararne is about how do you get the triple helix model moving, right? And triple helix, all said and done, I would even go ahead and make it into a quintuple helix, wherein it's not just the academia, civil society, and the industry, but I would also go ahead and say that what happens to ecology and people. As Uday brought about the fact that today you have rivers having a non-personhood in many ways, right? So it's also the fact that can we sort of start looking at ecology as one of the critical elements of that particular piece. And hence, when you start looking at co-thinking, what we are saying is that you can't operate in silos anymore. Now, if you're not going to be operating in silos, then orchestration becomes extremely important. And for orchestration, you need to be able to have the capacity to accommodate for diverse points of view and diverse domain experts to come in and start thinking about a problem. And in many ways, it's about the fact that can we think about a problem from the perspective of being a wicked problem, look at design thinking process. And that's where I think a lot of the work that Sujit is doing in terms of a digital public infrastructure. I think India is going ahead and creating a separate space for itself in terms of creating an overarching, overlying digital public infrastructure that is able to sort of bring in all the legacy systems together, but at the same time also go ahead and integrate some of the newer innovations that are coming. Right. A lot of times the analog thinking is about linear, whereas the kind of digital public infrastructure that India has brought about and the examples that Sujit gave, this is an extremely non-linear, sophisticated thought. And that in itself has been the core of Indian thinking, which is shunya, which is circular. You don't have, time doesn't end, and it's non-linear and it's circular.
That's interesting, Swami, and we will bring up more on that in seminar 4 later this evening. But I'd also like to point out that we have a very interesting audience, and these are industry professionals, those working to create an enabling ecosystem. They're researchers, students, not just from here, from Almedalen and from the rest of Sweden and Uppsala University, but also from Bangalore and Mumbai. In fact, I just got a message that we have students from R.N. Podar School also joining us. So this conversation from such a diverse mix of people all looking at trying to solve the sustainability puzzle through innovation, through circularity is very interesting for a range of people. And of course, those joining us, I'd like to say that you can ask your questions by clicking on the chat function in the interactive link. We have some questions, and if there is time, of course, I will take them up. But I'm going to go back to Neeraj, and if I can bring you in at this point of time, Neeraj, what role do you think that a consulting ecosystem should play more for orchestrating sustainability across sectors? Because experts enter sustainability from their vantage points. How can you be the orchestrator of getting everyone together? And also, I'm going to add another question to that. That do you say that digital technology would be an enabler? Would it be an engine for a more sustainable future? If you can link these two and
absolutely, Rupali. And let me take the technology one first, because I think it's quite obvious. Technology is the biggest enabler. When the elephants and the ants have to dance, it is technology which is the glue, right? The coming together on this forum, again, technology is the glue. When we talk about exponential take-up, technology is the key enabler, right? So today we are already in 4G world. Tomorrow we will be in 5G and 6G. Is something preventing us from, coming together in a 4G enabled world, which 5G or 6G will unlock? Possibly, yes, but it is on the fringes. What I mean to say is that the possibility exists today to orchestrate what Swami was saying, to orchestrate a thought process, the coming together of minds. And this is my favorite example when it comes to orchestration. When you cook, you orchestrate, you bring ingredients together. When a chef, Gustav, said in Ratatouille, anyone can cook, he was so right? So from a consulting perspective, if I kind of, try and link everything together, what we think is that we have a way of looking at things, at problem statements, wherein we can slice and dice and say what is really will move the needle. We have a way of looking at things because our clients expect us to make an impact day in, day out, every meeting we go to. Clients expect us to wow them, right? So we have a way of looking at things. And that's, I think, the viewpoint that we bring to the table as an orchestrator, potential orchestrator, is to basically say, this is the problem statement that exists now, whether it is at the ocean level that Professor Uday just showed us, or whether it is at a pond level, right? The problem exists. And we have, I think, that unique mindset of slicing and dicing and saying, how can then this problem be overcome, not by developing something new, but bringing to the table a thought process wherein people such as Uday and others who have already done a lot of thought process can be brought to the equation, can be given the platform, right? So that everything comes together. So that's really what role I think we as a consulting organization can play as an orchestrator, try and kind of, look at things the way we can think and bring into that an encompassing. And when we talk about this whole thing of shunya, zero, it is circular, but it is also encompassing, right? So bring in an encompassing thing, not to compete, because that's what all open source, I'm sure Sujit will agree, is all about, which is, bring it together, bring it in a collaborative environment. So Rupali, very long way of answering your question, but that's really what I think we bring to the table.
Right. And I want to also quickly remind us all that we have about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to shoot the next set of questions with very a rapid fire round, really. And coming to you, Professor Satya, in Sweden, the triple helix model, Swaminathan mentioned that there is more than a triple helix, but looking at industry, academia, government, that seems to have shown results. This was also one of the key takeaways from the ambassador's conversation. And he said that there was a safety net for entrepreneurs. It is safe to fail. In India also, the startup and innovation ecosystem seems to be getting better integrated with the academic system. Now, however, what is it that India can pick up from this triple helix model of Sweden?
Right. I think as the ambassador mentioned, I think the triple helix is already happening in India. I think it's probably newer than what has happened in Sweden, and we have a lot to learn. I've seen a lot of European models where they do a very, very focused approach between academia, government, and industry in trying to put them together. But I think in the last few years, this similar thing is happening in India. There is like a lot of industry participation that is required in projects that the government supports the academia on. That is one part of the story. The other part of the story is the startups. For example, IIT Madras incubation cell is now, I think, clocking about 240 startups, and I have a bunch of them. The National Center for Combustion Research and Development that I head actually already has about 7 startups, which are all in the deep tech space, including things like the E-plane company, which is supposed to be making electric planes or launching 3D printed rockets. Those kinds of very, very innovative, very high tech kind of, and ISRO, for example, is helping the Agnikul Cosmos, which is doing the 3D printed rockets and so on. An industry like Ashok Leyland is actually participating with micro gas turbine startups. And so very, very high tech startups that are possible to get industry support as well as government support is happening here. The other point I would like to make is we follow in India very, very naturally the lean startup model, which means that we don't really allow startups to fail as much. Right. So the notion that we can actually throw in a lot of money and get like about 9 out of 10 startups to fail so that it's okay to actually dream about any kind of idea. No, that's not what we do. Right. So here it's like more like the joint family system, right? We don't allow people to fail at all. So we have like a huge safety net, which now tries to reiterate on the idea that it actually has to have a very good business case. It should be technologically sound. There is so much validation that goes around in these startups that are being nurtured. I think our success story is going to be a lot better than the rest of the world.
That's interesting, Satya, and Sujit, and I beg your pardon, Dr. Satya, and this is a point which we will take in the other seminars as well. But if I can give 30 seconds each to Sujit and Per Arne, any last words? Cooperation, collaboration on innovation between Sweden and India, co-developing perhaps solutions for the world, thinking planetary scale. Sujit, you first.
Great. I think just to add one little perspective on the idea of scale, that how scale can do wonders to innovation is something that I think India is able to showcase, not just with private innovations, private entrepreneurial innovation, but also from public innovations, to think about scale and think about solutions that works at scale rather than scaling what works, factoring in the diversity and scale that India has. I mean, just look at the opportunity that lies in India as a marketplace. Today, digital marketplaces, digital e-commerce penetration is under 10% in India. The whole host of local retail is largely physical, and that's gone through this pandemic storm, struggling to and grappling to find a way to do business digital. And I think that the conventional global narrative of digital may not be fitting into the context at scale for India. So we need to rethink digital. And I think there's a plethora of opportunities there to think of both diversity, the contextual fitment, and scale at the same time. And I think that's an opportunity space. I'm sure both private entrepreneurship and public academy and all coming together can work together and demonstrate. And I think that's a great opportunity and exciting times right now for us to do that. Yeah.
For Arne, how can we start collaborating, producing, rolling out, co-developed innovations together?
All right. So in 30 seconds then, I would say that in order to establish this innovation thinking, everything, we need to meet each other on the dance floor, to start dancing, the ant and the elephant. And I'm thinking of 4 different dance floors. The university industry one, that's a really important one. We have the business industry dance floor. It's also extremely important. We have the private Swedish incubators. They are crucial, and they need to meet the Indian ones as well. And we also need to acknowledge that there is a huge important dance floor on the state regional level, where different stakeholders need to start dancing as well. That will be my 30-second conclusion. Yeah.
Well, thank you. We will take, of course, some of these strings in with Uday and Swami. So I'm not going to give you all the platform for the closing note right now. We are already a little ahead of, in fact, we've overshot our time. But thank you so much, Professor Satya Chakravarti. Thank you so much, Sujit Nair, Neeraj Jain, Per Arne Wikström, Professor Uday Ronstrom, and Dr. Swaminathan for joining us on this crucial debate. And I hope we can get you for more such conversations, even beyond the Almedalen week. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Rupali. Thanks, everyone.